Hello and welcome. In this video, I'll show to you how to set up a dedicated server for SoulFire. Dedicated servers allow you to run SoulFire on remote machines and run them 24/7 in the background without having it bound to your local computer via the integrated server. Alright, to get started, go to our website and press Documentation. Then you'll find the guide under Start Here, Deploy a dedicated server. In here, you'll be greeted by the steps required to set up a dedicated server. We have placed a table for reference on what type of machine you need for how many bots. You can also get 20 euros in free credits by using this Hetzner Cloud link. Alright, in the next step, I'll show how to set up a dedicated server with Hetzner Cloud to run your server in the background. And I will show to you how to connect to your Hetzner Cloud server via SSH. If you would not like to see how to set up a Hetzner Cloud server and instead have already SSH to a different server that you have already bought, you can skip the next section. Alright. To create Hetzner Cloud VPS, you get started by going to console.hetzner.com. After creating your project, in this example we'll use my demo project, you go to the Servers tab and press Add Server. Now you can decide what type of machine you want to create: cost optimized, regular performance, or general purpose. In this example, we'll use regular performance. In here, you can see all the CPU and RAM and storage and pricing for all the machine types. We'll use CPX62. What's great about Hetzner is that you can pay hourly. So if you only need to use SoulFire for 3 hours of the day, you can get the most expensive server and only pay this price over here for the hours you're using it. Now we've selected the machine type. Let's select Nuremberg and select what operating system we would like to install. Most of these operating systems will work. For example, Ubuntu is a popular choice, but Debian is what we'll use today. It is a very stable operating system with a lot of package support and is the main recommended installation type for the SoulFire dedicated server. You can also use an older version of Debian, however, only the latest one is officially supported. Same goes for all the other operating systems. Only the latest version of Debian is officially supported, but it might still work flawlessly on other operating systems. Now, it is recommended that you have at least a public IPv4, which is reachable from the internet. The reason is that IPv4 is the most common type of IP and causes the least amount of problems in the setup process. IPv6 is optional, but it is free of charge at Hetzner and is useful for specific network configurations or accessing IPv6 only services. Now, you're asked if you want to add an SSH key. SSH keys are useful if you have an SSH key which acts as a master password for all your servers. However, in this guide, we'll not use SSH keys as they require prior Linux or Windows knowledge, and we want to keep this guide as short as possible. But if you do have an SSH key, you can add it here to simplify the SSH connection process. You don't need volumes for extra storage, and you do not need any firewalls for SoulFire. By default, Hetzner allows traffic to any ports, for example 80 and 443, which will come in important later. Backups are optional, you will most likely not need them. You can skip all of these configuration options, and let's give this a name: SoulFire Demo Box. Create and buy, and now it is being created. Alright, let's enter. After creation, you will receive the root password via email. If you lose this password or need to reset it, you can go in this tab on Rescue and click Reset Root Password. This will, when the server is online and active, reset the root password and allow you to connect again, even if you have lost your root password. If you press console, you can see live how the operating system starts. And we can now see it has finished loading and we are able to connect externally. Now, to connect, we need the IP and a terminal and a password. So let's enter a terminal. SSH comes pre-installed with PowerShell, Windows Terminal, macOS, and Linux. So make sure you have SSH as a command on your system and a terminal open. Then SSH root add, then you paste your IP. Now you confirm that this is the trusted key, which by default you can just ignore. It will most likely be correct. Which by default does not matter. You can just press accept. Now the password is requested. Let's grab the password, reset, and press copy. If you have your password, you don't need to reset it every time. Just grab it from your email inbox. Press right click and paste. And now we're in. Now you have SSH and you can, on any machine that you have SSH to, from now on do the same steps. These are not Hetzner specific. So we'll go in and go back to our documentation and grab the setup script command. You press copy and paste. Now we press enter and we're in. I will briefly explain all the messages you see. So this is the initial view and it will tell you what the next steps are. Let's press OK. Now it explains to you the main installation methods. Cloudflare is recommended if you have a Cloudflare command and an existing domain because it simplifies the connection process and the setup process. This guide will not cover Cloudflare and it will not cover the domain HTTPS system. This guide will work without owning a domain, by connecting directly to the IP of your server without any domain. Just follow the recommendation wizard later or enter manually if you want to use a domain. Let's press OK. HTTPS and SoulFire is mostly required and recommended. HTTPS ensures all the secrets and all the passwords that you send in via SoulFire are encrypted when they are sent to the server. So only the server can read the contents of your, for example, Minecraft accounts. Let's Encrypt is used as the signing authority, which is a common and well-supported option for issuing certificates. You need to make sure that your server is reachable on ports 80 and 443 for Let's Encrypt to work. One other thing is that SoulFire requires HTTPS on the browser version at app.soulfiremc.com, as well as on the macOS version, because browsers ensure that you are using HTTPS to connect to the SoulFire dedicated server. Now, let's continue. It asks if you want to update, and now we press yes. It is now preparing your system. This will take some time depending on the machine type and CPU speed. It has finished updating the system dependencies and is now setting up a Docker. Docker is the service used to run SoulFire in the background. Now, you're asked what email address you want to use to log into SoulFire. For this example, we'll use root@soulfiremc.com. You should use your own email you want to use for login. By default, SoulFire is not able to actually send emails. You can set up that manually after login. By default, email codes are printed to the SoulFire console, which you can access later in the script. Now press enter. And now we're asked, what way would we like to install SoulFire? We are not going to use Cloudflare because we are going to use direct IP connection and there is no Cloudflare account. We don't have a domain. We'll use traffic plus IP HTTPS, which will issue a certificate for HTTPS without a domain required. If you do not possess a public IP and you're sure the traffic between you and the SoulFire dedicated server cannot be intercepted and viewed by a third party, you can use HTTP only. But be aware, without any encryption, someone might inject into your network or filter your traffic and see the raw traffic, for example, your Minecraft passwords being sent if you use the Minecraft login method, as well as your SoulFire access credentials. Alright, let's press OK. We're now being asked whether we want to use the recommendation wizard. If you press no, you can manually select the option. If you press yes, it will ask questions and then choose the right installation method for you. Let's press yes. We are not using SoulFire only locally. We would like to connect through the internet to SoulFire. And there's no existing HTTPS reverse proxy. That means we'll say no to this question. We do not have a domain and we do not have a Cloudflare account, so we cannot use Cloudflare D or Cloudflare tunnels for easy setup. We do not have a domain. And this question is important. Can port 80 and 443 be reached from the public internet? If you only have a local IP and your public IP is not forwarding port 80 and 443, so not your local IP, but the IP reachable from the internet, as seen in later steps where it's automatically detecting the IP, you have to make sure it reaches actually the machine hosting SoulFire on port 80 and 443. By default, the IPv4 at Hetzner does forward ports 80 and 443 to the machine, because by default there is no firewall and the IP is directly assigned to the Hetzner machine. So, in our case, we can press yes. But it might be different in your setup, for example, if your machine is running locally and you're not forwarding any ports. Now the recommendation wizard has selected traffic plus IP HTTPS. And we're making sure ports 80 and 443 are reachable from the internet. Let's press yes. This will set up traffic, which is an automated system for setting up the traffic being routed to the SoulFire dedicated server, and it takes care of setting up HTTPS and the certificates needed for TLS for HTTPS. IP certificates are short-lived, around 6 days, but they're auto-renewed by traffic, which means you do not need to worry about certificates being short-lived. Now it has automatically detected the IP of this machine. Make sure this is the actual public internet IP of your machine. Let's continue. Let's Encrypt requires you to provide an email This should also be your personal address you want to attach to the SoulFire machine. In this example, we'll use root@soulfiremc.com. But for your own setup, you should use your own email address. Let's press OK. Now we can review the details. This will be the access URL for SoulFire later. And this will be the Let's Encrypt email, and this the initial root email. Let's press OK. And now the script is actually starting to set up SoulFire, pulling the SoulFire code, pulling the traffic code, starting it in the background, and now it's waiting for SoulFire to finish loading. This might take longer depending on your CPU type. If you know Docker, you can access the Docker Compose at this path. Now, SoulFire has finished loading in 24 seconds, and we're waiting for traffic to finish issuing a SSL HTTPS certificate. Done. SoulFire can now be accessed under this IP. Now we press OK. And we immediately go into the management system. To show, we can exit it and just run the command again to enter the SoulFire management system again. So if you ever need this view back for SoulFire management, just run the command again from the setup guide. In here, you can attach, view logs, see the status, update SoulFire manually, reconfigure your SSL configuration, or uninstall SoulFire entirely. Now we'll access the logs, which are live. You can press Ctrl+C to leave this view and get back to the SoulFire management system. If you press Attach, don't worry, this is not broken. You can just press Enter to get the cursor back. You can now run commands like help to directly run SoulFire commands as if you had directly ran the jar. Now you can leave this view again and look at logs. Now you can go in and use the direct access URL at app.soulfiremc.com or your locally installed SoulFire client. In here, you select Dedicated Server. Now you can put in the address you've just copied. This is HTTPS with these 3 characters and then the IP. For this guide, we've used root@soulfiremc.com and can now press Login. A code would have been sent now to that email address, but by default, SoulFire does not actually send the code. You just look at the logs from this terminal. This is the code. Copy it and paste. And tada, we have now accessed the instance. Now you can make an instance and do everything as normal. For example, go to terminal and run the help command, or go in and edit any of the settings SoulFire offers. You can set up emails by going back to the dashboard and entering the admin settings. If you know how SMTP works, you can go in and change the email type to SMTP and change the SMTP host and username and password information. That way, you can actually send emails instead of printing them to console. You should also look into updating your public address if necessary. For example, by just entering the domain or the address you've selected to connect to SoulFire. The reason this is useful is you can use it to configure what is printed in the access screen. For example, the web dev access uses this as well as the API access. From here, you can also access the API SoulFire offers. For example, press copy address, and we open a new tab with it. And voila, you can now read the whole API SoulFire offers for you. What's also useful to know is you do not have to use the email login method if you do not wish to set up emails or email sending. All you have to do is go to the terminal, go into attach mode, and then run generate token API. You can copy this token to connect to the root account without having to use an email. Just press logout, go back to dedicated server, and instead of use email, you press use token, enter the token, and log in. Voila! This might be useful to some people, but it is generally not recommended to use tokens for logging into software. However, for some people it might be useful to know that you can log in via API token instead. Alright, thank you for listening. This is all. Have a nice day.